why did you guys decide to put a lot more focus on Comorian weddings? Like what drove you to make that decision?
Yeah, and I guess I can kind of talk about that a little bit. So I know when we were in our first round of interviews, I think we knew we wanted to talk about the Comoros, and we knew we wanted to try to highlight it in a specific cultural context that was specific enough not to be, widely applaud. That was specific enough not to just be widely applauded or be something that's like, oh, like, this can happen anywhere. And I don't know, even to your point with how big African weddings are, to a degree, there is kind of like that generality, but I think the reason why we kind of chose to focus on it was because as we interview people, a lot of the important things that came up, whether it be positive or negative, kind of in some ways linked to the practice of the weddings. And like, a lot of people had very strong opinions about it, and we really just thought that it would be interesting to kind of try to frame the country and like frame like kind of like a lot of the things that are going on through the event, because it was something that affected it both in the past, the present, and like is already looking to shape the future in terms of like making the decision of like what will weddings in the Comoros look like in the future, and how will it affect how we're able to interact with our country and live happy and fulfilled lives as well. So we just thought that the weddings would be a good place to kind of start and like be kind of a vehicle to take us to the other issues and topics into Comoros that we thought were important to the people who we're interviewing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like Ozzy just said, the hope was that it wouldn't be necessarily the sole topic, but because we conducted initial interviews like we did with you, Moon, that was really open-ended to see like what the people who we were interviewing wanted to talk about, what's on their minds, what are the big problems, big whatever topics. And we had so much information and needed a way to connect it all for our podcast. And that we found to be the marriages, which I think also to an extent makes sense. We hope that that's not the limit of where people see the conversation. Like that's not the only level this conversation hopefully lies in, but also it makes sense because I think, at least in my experience, having been in the Comoros, it was the first thing that hit me. Like I went there, and then I think the next day I was in a village. My host mom took me to a wedding. And then it was like every day and every week, right? It's just like all the time, all around. So I think that made sense as a topic. Jazz, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you guys kind of covered it, but like I will say that initially I was not interested in focusing on weddings because Comoros is so much more. I mean, and like what has stood out to me and what I observed had nothing to do with weddings. Like I only went to them if I was really pressured, and I didn't go to nearly as many as Kako did. But that being said, like when our initial approach was very broad and we had a lot of material, and we kind of needed to find a common thread, and really like what Kako had said, like we're really hoping that people can look beneath the layers of the grand marriage and they can kind of see some more like issues of maybe it's not even an issue, but social reproduction. Like, why do we do the things that we do? What is culture? Where do cultural practices come from? And even, I mean, in every culture, people continuously do something, even though it's like incredibly expensive. And even though it doesn't seem maybe to like really pay off in some type of sense, I think that exists for all humans all over the world. And so if hopefully people can, gather that from this podcast and, see past that, just the weddings.